Welcome back to Heritage Food Stories, Episode 9, The Untold History of the African American Cowboy. When most people picture a cowboy, they imagine a lone figure riding across open plains with a white hat and a six-gun. The cowboy is a powerful American symbol, but that image is incomplete. This episode is about a piece of history that most of us were never taught in school. This month, as we honor Black History Month, we are digging into the history of African American cowboys, their contributions to the West, and the deeper roots of cowboy culture in American history.
I'm your host, Chef Murray, a classically trained New York City chef with deep roots in Caribbean culture and a lifelong passion for global cuisines, culinary history, and the stories behind the food we eat.
So, what's the image that comes to your head when someone says cowboy? Is it someone with dark skin who carries the struggles of his ancestors in his blood and who has contributed in major ways to the development of America as we know it today, but whose history is often ignored and being erased in today's era of an attack on diversity in education? When most people picture a cowboy, the image is usually the same: white, rugged, solitary, riding across the American West like something out of a John Wayne film. But that image is incomplete and incorrect. During Black History Month, especially, we need to acknowledge stories that were pushed to the margins of American history. These stories are not secondary, they are foundational to the country we live in today. African American cowboys were not rare exceptions. They were a significant part of the workforce that built the cattle industry and shaped the American West. Yet their stories are still challenged, minimized, or ignored in classrooms, particularly in today's climate where discussions of race and systemic inequality are labeled controversial. The truth is simple. The American cowboy as we know it would not exist without African Americans. The history of the word cowboy reflects the racial hierarchy of the 19th century. In the plantation South, Black men were frequently referred to as boy, regardless of age. It was a deliberate term of disrespect used to diminish grown men. When Black men worked with cattle, the term cowboy was often applied to them in that same spirit of diminishment. White cattle workers, by contrast, were more commonly called cowhands, a term that implied skill and labor rather than subordination. At the same time, the broader cowboy tradition did not originate with Anglo Americans at all. It was deeply influenced by Mexican vaqueros, who were expert horsemen and cattle herders long before westward expansion. African American cowboys learned from these Mexican vaqueros, as well as former enslaved people who ran southern ranches and Native American horse handlers. The techniques we associate with cowboy culture today came largely from Spanish and Mexican ranching traditions. These include lassoing and roping, branding practices, herding methods, saddle design, the word rodeo itself. African American cowboys worked alongside vaqueros and helped adapt these practices into what became known as American ranch culture. The cowboy was never a lone white figure. It was a multicultural workforce built on shared labor, shared risk, and shared expertise. Now let's go back to the Civil War. At the height of the cattle driving era, between the 1860s and 1890s, historians estimate that as many as 1 in 4 cowboys were African American. Roughly 25% of the workforce driving cattle across the West after the Civil War was Black. That was not incidental. It was structural. When the Civil War ended in 1865, formerly enslaved men possessed the precise skills ranching required. For generations, they had been forced to handle livestock, ride and train horses, mend fences, survive extreme outdoor conditions. They had done this labor without pay. After emancipation, cowboy work became one of the few professions where demonstrated skill could sometimes outweigh race, at least on the trail. On a cattle drive, competence mattered. Your ability to ride, rope, protect cattle, and endure brutal conditions could mean survival. This does not mean racism disappeared. It did not. But the practical demands of the work created spaces where skill commanded a certain level of respect. Black cowboys often faced additional burdens. They were sometimes given the most difficult horses. Many took on multiple roles, serving as cooks, hunters, entertainers, and protectors. Some even worked as guards for white cattlemen transporting money on livestock. The American West was not a racial utopia, but the shared hardships of trail life sometimes blurred rigid Southern hierarchies in ways that surprised many who moved west. So let's talk about some of the legendary Black cowboys. African American cowboys were not just laborers. Some became legends in their own lifetimes. Nat Love documented his life as a cowboy in the late 19th century and earned the nickname Deadwood Dick. His autobiography remains one of the few first-hand accounts of Black cowboy life. Bill Pickett invented bulldogging, now known as steer wrestling. He developed the technique of wrestling cattle to the ground by gripping the animal's lip with his teeth. He later performed internationally and was inducted into the National Rodeo Hall of Fame. Bass Reeves, one of the first Black U.S. Marshals west of the Mississippi, arrested more than 3,000 criminals. Many historians believe his life inspired the archetype that became the Lone Ranger. These men were not anomalies. They were visible examples of a much larger Black presence that shaped ranching, law enforcement, and frontier culture. For every famous name, there were countless others who never wrote memoirs or toured Europe. They worked cattle, built ranches, and sustained an industry that became central to American identity. So, why is this not common knowledge? The erasure was intentional. As Western films and dime novels rose in popularity in the early 20th century, the cowboy was recast as a white masculine hero. Hollywood simplified the story of the West and stripped it of its multiracial reality. That distortion continues today in more explicit ways. Across multiple states, books about Black history and systemic racism are being banned or restricted. Educators are told to avoid topics labeled divisive, even when they are grounded in documented historical fact. Teaching Black history is not about assigning guilt, it is about accuracy. When we remove African American cowboys from the story, we distort the American landscape itself. We erase who built it, who sustained it, and who shaped its culture. Truth is not divisive, erasure is. Food is one of the most powerful carriers of memory, especially for communities whose stories were not consistently written down. Cowboy cooking was practical and portable. Meals had to survive long cattle drives and unpredictable conditions. Common trail foods included beans, stews, chili, salted meats, and cornbread. These dishes were influenced by African, Mexican, and indigenous foodways. Techniques, spices, and cooking methods blended just as cultures did on the trail. It is not just comfort food, it reflects survival, adaptation, and the cultural exchange that defined life on the range. Every pot tells a story, and sometimes that story is bigger than the mythology that surrounds it. The African American cowboy is not a footnote in history. He is central to it. Understanding this history expands our view of what America actually is. It is a country shaped by Black labor, Black skill, and Black resilience, even when recognition was denied. As Black History Month continues, I hope conversations like this encourage curiosity, courage, and truth telling. Because when we know better, we preserve better, and we cook, teach, and live with more intention. Thank you for joining me today. Any relevant links will be in the show notes. See you next time.